technological challenges, we'll just wing it, okay? Yeah, I apologize for not, for the technological challenges, but it's one of those things. We'll just make it happen. Okay, so we were chatting about Michel. We were chatting about his history, and we were chatting about our friendship. We were chatting about what he sees and how he sees the things happening with the farmers in Europe, with the global economic things in Europe. He's a very wise and smart individual, very insightful, and also very proactive when he sees opportunities that he can take advantage of to better serve his customers. He actually does. And so we had a lovely, long conversation about the factors going on in Europe. Now, I'll share with you some of his observations that are happening in Europe right now. Michel, how are the farmers doing? And he said, no, not very well. What do you mean? Well, you know, things are very skinny. Well, how is employment? Oh, employment is very low. We're not seeing a whole lot of prosperity in Europe, even though the powers that be are telling us that. I see. And where do you see and what do you see happening? He said, well, a lot of the big guys, a lot of the really large companies are elbowing out the really little companies. And it's a very interesting mindset about how we prosper. Now, most individuals who are mindful and who are loving and caring and all that good stuff, they prosper by saying, let's collaborate and cooperate and let's participate together so everybody wins, right? Oftentimes the big guys get in there and with their elbows up really high, they say, in order for me to win, you have to lose. So we're going to take you to task and we're going to do some interesting stuff in that regard. That's not a particularly healthy way to play, in my opinion, and probably in most of yours. So we chatted about what he's doing next, and he said, well, oftentimes farmers are being forced to sell their product forward, which is, you go to a farmer and you say, I want all of your wheat this year. That's called selling your wheat forward. So you give me $3 a bushel, and I'll give you 1,000 bushels from this field, and away you go. Those are how we deal with the farms on the planet. And it's the same with the essential oil. Now, but what tends to happen sometimes is essential oils become so dear and so sought after that somebody will buy it. Well, did you hear about the internet, a guy who bought the pharmaceutical company and turned his AIDS drugs into, right? He bought a pharmaceutical company and an AIDS drug was trading at 100 units of money, and he as soon as he bought it, he said, this drug that I'm going to sell now for 7,000 instead of 100, right? So what we're seeing is a bit of a ball rolling in terms of greed. And boy, there was a huge backlash. They said, are you kidding? That's very incredibly thoughtless and incredibly greedy of you. Okay, back to Michel and the farms. He's going to go and buy a farm, and he is going to start to grow product in various parts of Europe because he sees that vertical integration, knowing his product and having his product is beneficial to his business and also to ours as well, and you as well. Now, I didn't get a chance to show you the lab, but I'll describe the lab. We'll use word pictures as opposed to real pictures. He has a laboratory there, and he's just hired some scientists, and they're very fastidious in making sure that they know the depth and breadth and chemistry of the essential oils. Now, one of the things that happens with Mother Nature is, let's just take lavender for ease of use. Lavender has this many constituents. All of these constituents are contributory to your health and your well-being. So if it's good lavender, if it's grown in proper conditions, if it's grown in good soil and it's grown without herbicides and pesticides and the like, it's an incredibly beneficial oil to your system. Now, what many chemists will do is they'll say, well, these constituents still smell like lavender. Why don't we just get rid of all the rest of it? That's sort of like saying, well, I'll recognize you, but we don't need your legs or your arms. You say, whoa, just a second, right? So an interesting approach by some chemists and some of the fragrance companies, because fragrance companies will take all of these constituents and they'll chemically denude it and bring it down so it smells like whatever it is it smells like. So who smelled perfume that gives you a headache, right? So there's something about artificial or compromised fragrances that will give you a headache, artificial, okay, and they're created. Now, it doesn't mean that taking all these components down to the most germane, it doesn't mean these components are invalid, it just means they aren't complete. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So now, we talk about how we get essential oils. I want to wander you through a bit of that to give you an education on how essential oils. We saw distillation, okay? There's another way. Let me tell you a little France story. We went, L'Oréal, do you know that name? L'Oréal, the great fragrance company? We went to a field, this is in the south of France as well, very close to the water, to the Mediterranean. And every day, they bring, the harvesters of the rose just wear great big aprons. And so the aprons just have big pouches in them, and every day they go out and they just pull the blossoms off the roses, and they pop them in this thing. Then they bring them back and dump them into burlap sacks. And then the next day they come out and do it again, because all the blossoms aren't out. So they're picking fresh blossoms every day. So it's just the majesty of the fresh blossoms. That's a very fastidious program. And they work 7 days a week for about 6 or 8 weeks. That's the harvest. But they pick off the same rose bushes every day, new blossoms, okay? And then they bring it in, and they brought it into this wonderful place, and L'Oréal said, nobody's allowed in here anywhere. Like, we just close all the doors and do all that stuff, and Ray and I show up. Excuse me, can we come in? Oh yeah, you can, come on in. And so we participated in this. And some of the harvest they make, not using distillation, because rose is so fragile that if you took 5,000 pounds of rose petals and you distilled it, how many pounds of oil would you get? Any guesses? Yeah. You get 1 pound of oil for 5,000 pounds of roses. Now, eucalyptus, you can go into LA and pull eucalyptus leaves off a tree and get 50 pounds. You get a pound of oil out of 50 pounds of eucalyptus. So the yield on eucalyptus leaves is a little bigger, okay? So that's why rose oil, 1, is so expensive, and 2, is considered one of the essential oils, okay? Rose, neroli, jasmine, various things. So but the process that L'Oréal was using was called solvent extraction. Now, solvent extracting is you put all the plant product in, and solvent extraction is a cool extraction method into hexane, and then you take off the hexane, and then you are left with these tubs of what's called concrete, and they are dark red, and they have all the constituents of the rose plant in there, but they're darker. So those are called rose absolutes, and that's why on your shelf we have Rose Otto, which is distilled, and Rose Absolute, where the yield is higher. Okay, so that's another methodology. The methodology that's been used forever, and you'll love this. Do you remember the white wigs that all the old barristers in England used to wear? And they were all, there's all kinds of lovely trivia about that. But what they used to do is they used to lay fat in these white wigs. I kid you not. They used to lay fat in these white wigs, and then they used to lay flowers on the fat. No kidding. This was hundreds of years ago. And then they used to take all the flour and then put the wig on, full of fat, and it would drip all over them all day. But they would smell good. So they would stink, but they would smell good. Because back in those days, like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they thought many of the Western world thought that bathing was not a good idea, right? It was a very interesting little bit of tidbit. Now, enfleurage is you lay out fat, and it used to be lard, and you just used to lay the flowers in this. And that is how they got the essential oils. That's called enfleurage, okay? So yeah, on one hand it's kind of trivia, but on the other it's kind of neat, right? So, there's another methodology, which is a cooler methodology, and that's taking the plant material and passing carbon dioxide through it. That's a carbon dioxide extraction. Now the carbon dioxide extraction, when the carbon dioxide in a pressurized container hits the plant material, it turns into kind of a solvent, but the CO2, there's nothing left over when the CO2's extracted, and you get CO2 extractions. Now those are, the technology is a little more advanced, and they're a little more expensive, okay? So now let's chat a little about the business of the aromatherapy business. Most of you don't read the global economic, political nonsense that's going on the planet. Is that fair? Who travels to the States? Okay, I'm gonna paint you a picture of the currency wars that are currently going on financially, and because I think it's germane to what you're doing, and it's also germane to the business that we play in. 2 years ago, at about this time, 2 years ago, the Canadian and the US dollar were about here. They were 1 to 105, 103, 102, and then the chart goes like this, right? And then about a year, maybe a little more than a year ago, the US dollar starts to go like this. And the US dollar, when you go down, the last time I was in the States and I went, here is Canadian dollars, what will you give me? It worked out that each US dollar that the bank gave me cost me $1.40. That's a 40% change. Okay, now we won't go into the big picture of why this is all happening, but what's happening right now is the US currency is becoming very, 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 very strong. Now I buy my essential oils from all over the planet. Now when I buy in Europe, I pay with euros, and guess what the euro's done? Relative to the Canadian dollar. However, there's certain places in Europe that don't work on the euro. There's certain places, Madagascar, there's various places all over the planet that we buy our oils, but what do they want to be paid in? They want to be paid in US dollars. So when they get paid in US dollars, I could pay them in their own currency. If in fact I could pay them in their own currency, we would see a leveling out because many currencies have fallen against the US dollar. So we carry on all the same business, except now we're buying from this supplier who says, please pay me in US dollars in Madagascar, in Sri Lanka, in parts of, I mean, we were buying from Tunisia before they kind of blew it up, in various parts of Africa. So all of a sudden, nothing's changed, but all of our products are 40% more expensive. What an interesting thing. That has nothing to do with, it isn't they're more expensive because there's no supply. It isn't because they're more expensive because it's better quality. It's the same quality, same farmers, everything. The whole transaction happens where all of a sudden, now can you imagine getting your paycheck every month, you get a paycheck with 100 units of value. Can you imagine your paycheck going from 100 to 50? Can you imagine your paycheck going from 100 to 70? No? That's what's happening globally. So oftentimes the people who make the rules, the people who transact in currencies, they act in a manner that isn't particularly good for everybody, and it affects our business, right? And so both the euro and the US dollar, the chart that would be up here if we were working properly, you have seen that we've seen some. So we will be having some price increases in Canadian dollars. They wouldn't be increases in US dollars, but because we transact in Canada, there will be some price increases. But for those of you who are on the floor, price point is a very important thing for shoppers, and we need to be ever mindful that you understand what is happening. Now, what often, I mean, here's a simple farmer thing. We have a hailstorm that wipes out, let's just pretend we have a hailstorm that wipes out all of the wheat. Bread's going to get more expensive. It just can't help but. That makes sense, right? Now, let's segue into, that's the business side of it, and we segue into the finding really good suppliers that you know and that you trust and that use methodologies that are mindful of the plant's majesty. Transacting in a way that you have some history. I mean, Kim and Ray were great pals for years and years and years and years, and community and RDA have been participants and collaborators for years and years and years, developing a rapport, developing a relationship, and doing it in a fashion where you can see trends coming. You can see, I mean, there was a lavender mite issue in the south of France for a long time, so the lavender yields were going down because the mites were destroying some of the crops. Being and understanding that sandalwood has changed over the years in terms of its availability and the like. And so when you spend the past almost 30 years in the business, you develop a mindset. If you choose to, you develop a mindset and you develop a rapport with all of your players in the field so that you can continue to provide product. And there's also the why of the business that we do. And one of the things that I know that you guys are working through, and certainly it's something that I've been working through, is when many businesses operate in order to make money. But very few businesses know that maybe it isn't so much the making of the money that's the ultimate incentive, but it's providing a service of good quality goods to your customer base. And the money will follow. So when you have an intentionality that says it's really important for us to participate in a way that the why of the business. Here's the why of Radent Aromatics. We scoured the planet to find wonderful products, wonderful farmers, wonderful people who are in the business of providing Mother Nature's immune system in a bottle. Distillation is taking the immune system of a plant and putting it into a bottle. And it's a very important aspect of what we do. That's the why of what we do. We want to pass along. And the why of what we do is because my wife was a genius in many aspects. She was gracious and kind, and she was so plugged in to Mother Nature that she said, I want to share this. Now, a vignette into Apple products, the iPhones and the iPods, and Stephen Jobs instilled in Apple the why of why Apple wanted to and did what it did. And it would say, let's take technology and make it absolutely drop dead simple so that everybody can use it for their own service. Use it for music, use it for a telephone, use it for a computer. Make it so simple that it's really easy to use. And those of us who have used Apple products, you do get that that's the why of Apple products. Now there's other companies. There's Dell, for example, say we're going to make computers and we're going to make them super cheap and we're going to make them to make money. I've had the opportunity to sit down with Stephen 3 times in my life, and one of the first conversations that happened, this was a long time ago, but was people love our products, the Apple products. People don't love PCs. They just put up with them. And there's a very important reason to the why, the raison d'être, to the business that we play. And that is to pass along really good quality products because we are invested in Mother Nature's majesty. Now I have, unfortunately, it's unavailable at this instant, but I have a video of Ray speaking to what a great life purpose I have, is to use these essential oils to pass along to those individuals to help you with your health, to contribute to your emotional well-being, to contribute to your first aid kit that isn't necessarily chemicals, it's Mother Nature's majesty, okay? Now, I want to tell a brief story and then we'll go to questions, and my apologies for this again. When we were in Turkey, we met a lovely guy named Nuri and Robbie Zek, and Ray and Jim and I went to see Nuri. And Nuri is in the business of producing rose oil. And rose oil, as you can imagine, I mean, that much rose oil is $8,000 or $9,000 bucks, right? And so we were there to transact. We were buying a bunch of Nuri's products. And then Robbie said, I've got a surprise for you, because we went into Nuri's place. And they had a room with about this many chairs, right? And they had a room that was about that big, full of rose petals. And so we went and played in them. You got in these rose petals, and you've felt rose petals, right? Soft as satin. They're just wonderful. So we all got played and threw it around. Now, many thousands of years ago, Cleopatra would have parties in rose petals. But what she'd do is she'd have the Egyptians fill rooms. And a room would be the size of a football stadium, right? A football field. And she'd fill rooms with rose petals. And it got a bit, what's the phrase? Hedonistic, perhaps, in these rooms? Anyways, oftentimes in the morning it was reputed that they'd find people drowned. There's dead people on the floor because of but they've known the power of essential oils and the power of plant material for a long, long time. So Cleopatra would have looked at this and go, back in my day, we would have filled the room with rose petals and played in that. So I will leave you with this. We are delighted to be of service. We're delighted to share our why with you. And we're also delighted to have all of your attention, because I think as things change, we start to change the way we do business. We're starting to see globally that there is a greed factor out there that makes us a little upset. And the greed factor of big box and the greed factor of you have to lose in order for me to win it doesn't work anymore. And there's something about the collaboration and cooperation and recognizing that we're all in this together in a place that allows us to prosper as opposed to profit. They're a bit different. The tenor behind those two words is a bit different. And again, part of what we do is offer Mother Nature's majesty in the essential oils. Now to that, what I'll do is open the floor for questions, to the best of questions or comments or observations.
Jeff, can you explain, so if you go to Walmart and you can buy a lavender for $40, hard to describe that to customers.
Great thinking, and that's a super question. Okay, so let's say rose oil. You can go and buy that much rose oil for $10. That's like saying you can go and buy a brand new automobile for $100. There's something wrong with that, right? You stick your key in and you drive it off and the police attack you and go, car thief, right? Something to that effect. Now what happens is chemistry can take the constituents of rose oil and artificially create a rose smell, and then they'll put them in a carrier oil. They'll put them in canola, or they'll put them in rice bran, or they'll put them in jojoba, and then it'll smell or it'll stink like rose. So what happens is that the chemistry business, the chemical business, can recreate fragrances and then sell them in a manner that is they are compromised effectively. And essential oils oftentimes are well, I mean, here's a classic example. In France, they have this much lavender that they produce in a year. Sorry, let me do this. In France, they have this much lavender they produce in a year, and this is how much they export in a year. How do they do that? Any thoughts? Any ideas? Pardon? They could be diluting it. That's a good answer, and that sort of comes to mind. What else? Adding a carrier. Okay, that would, yeah, okay, absolutely. Or mixing it with something else, yes. But now, if I was buying what I thought was lavender, and I saw that it was in a carrier, I'd take exception to that. They do this because this is lavandin. It's not lavender. It has different components. It has different constituencies than lavender. And lavandin grows everywhere. Lavender only grows above 800 meters altitude. So if you see a field that looks like lavender on the coast, at sea level, it's not lavender. It's lavandin. Now lavandin is good and wonderful and lovely and has a great fragrance, but it's not lavender. It doesn't have the chemistry, it doesn't have the effect, it doesn't have the components of lavandin. So it's something that we need to be ever mindful of. And when we see in the body shop, now and this is what we actually do. We tell everybody that we do it, but we actually do. We'll take rose oil and we will put 10 or 20 drops in this much jojoba, so a carrier oil, and we'll sell this at a lower price point so that you can experience really high quality rose oil, but in a dilution. So if you go into the body shop and you buy rose oil, it's exactly the same thing. But in their rose oil, we don't know, and I'm not here to say whether they do or not, but they may just put rose fragrance. So their cost on that they sell you at $10 is $1 or $2, right? Because they can fragrance it with rose fragrance. Now they may actually put rose oil in. Maybe it's 1 drop or 2 drops. But part of what we do is what we sell, and what we sell through you is we'll say it's a 5% or it's a 10% solution. So we'll take 100 units, 5 of the units will be pure rose oil, and 95 units will be jojoba. Okay? So that's how we do it, and that's oftentimes how you can go into a Walmart and find inexpensive oils. You can also find I don't want to actually say dregs, so I won't say the word dregs, but we'll talk about how distillation will have the first distillate, the distillate that comes off the top, and you take that, and that's premium, and then they'll just distill the plant product again. So the richness and the breadth of the plant product comes off, and it's less. It's just not as rich and as big, and that would be the second distillate, the third distillate. So oftentimes those don't see the same price point. So you can buy those for fragrancing your soaps and stuff. Okay. Now there's certain places you don't want absolutely brilliant essential oils in your shampoo, because the shampoo volume versus the essential oil volume is not that important, right? With really good product in a very, very small amount in a shampoo gives it a wonderful fragrance. But how many of you use shampoo that smells really good? Right? The shampoo manufacturers, all the Lanzas and all the hair care products, they are absolute wizards. They're very, very competent at creating great fragrances. But they're fragrances. Just know that. They are fragrances. They use essential oils to do that, but they are fragrances. Because shampoo, the margins on shampoo is quite dramatic. Okay? And one of the reasons, well, I mean, we've been in business, again, we aren't in business for the whole venue of profiteering, to be able to buy something at $1 and pass it off to you at 10. We have very skinny margins because we play the game of disintermediation, and that is being able to buy directly from the farmers. It comes to us, we buy 1,000 or 100,000 liters of whatever product, and then we package it to distribute it, okay? Just as you buy sometimes from cooperatives of farmers and the like, right? Whereas the shampoo business, to the best of my knowledge, they buy their products and they sell it, it costs them $1, they sell it at 5, and then the 5 goes to 10 and the 10 goes to 20. So a $20 bottle of shampoo costs sometimes, okay? So the price point is something that you may face when you're on the floor. And they say, what's the difference? Well, the difference is direct distribution. And the difference is, and why are the prices going up? The US dollar has gone through the roof, and it won't last. It's lasted for a couple of years, and it may last for a while longer, but we will see some big financial shifts and changes as all of these things shake out. Now, one of my chapters in my misspent youth is that I used to buy and sell companies, and I used to manage billions of dollars. So that's one of the reasons I'm modestly conversant in how this all works. And if history repeats itself, which it almost always does, we will see a correction in that regard. But that's when we go down to the States, as Adam was saying, you go down to the States, and what used to be a $25 lunch in the States is now $35, because it's 40% more expensive. And that's not inconsequential when it comes to when you're buying your products. Now, and when you buy your products from anybody in the world, they usually say, we're going to buy it in US dollars. So that's also something to be very mindful of. Any other questions, comments, or queries?
What makes the oils not food grade?
Good. That's a very good point. Okay, so there's various grades of essential oils. Okay. Most of the oils that we sell are wild crafted, which means they're grown without herbicides and pesticides, but in order to get qualified as being organic, they have to go through very expensive things. And the farmer says, if I'm only earning this much money every year, and I have to spend this much in getting it qualified, I know Michelle. I'll just tell them, and we know, and the bigger the farms get, the more they're prepared to play the game of organic. So organic is very important. Now, food grade is the extraction process is cheaper, possibly through a solvent. And they used to extract essential oils using benzene. Well, benzene is a carcinogen. So if they use benzene to extract the products, it may have traces of benzene in it, and consequently you're selling essential oils that have traces of carcinogens in them. Okay, and beside every single one of our essential oils that you know, and on all the labels it says how they are extracted. Okay. Now, they've changed, and we won't sell benzene extracted oils, and our Rose Absolute is extracted using hexane, which leaves less than 5 parts per million, which is that's how much you have to have in order for it to be safe, and this is how much that the stuff that we use is. So that's why therapeutic grade quality oils. Now, the other thing is, from time immemorial, the uses of essential oils, we all know how to use essential oils, right? You smell them, you pop them in the bath, you put them in the shower, you get your eucalyptus or you get your Respare, and you hop in the shower and you drop 5 things on the floor and it hits you like right? You put them in diffusers, you put them in massage oils, you use them in massage oils, you put it over a bowl of hot water and pop a towel over your head, which it may be the season coming. We might start to get cold and start to get runny noses as well. So they are very powerful. And if you want to experiment, while we never say you take essential oils internally, and those who would profess that that's perfectly okay, we want to be ever mindful that taking essential oils internally is not something that we propagate, not because it cannot be done, but because it steps into an arena that says essential oils should be governed by the Medical Association or by the FDA, okay? Now, a drop of peppermint oil on your tongue, on your end of your finger, and then go like this. You know, you've had a Tic Tac, or you've had, right? It's about 100 times more powerful. Just a drop of plant material is quite magic in that regard. Now, what we've brought today, aside from food, we've brought for you all a little gift, and it's called Raiders. And we've coined the phrase Raiders with Ray's name and doctors, because she was a bit of a wizard in that regard. Now, back in the time of the bubonic plague, which ravaged Europe and took